Detective Rachel Martinez had earned her call sign, Sunday, during her first year on the force. While other officers dreaded weekend shifts, she volunteered for every Sunday rotation, claiming she did her best work when the world moved slower. The truth was more personal. Sundays reminded her of quiet mornings with her late father, a retired cop who taught her that justice never took a day off. 8 years later, she had closed more cold cases on Sundays than most detectives managed in entire careers. The call came in at 7:43 a.m. on a crisp October morning. Another missing person case, 22-year-old Emily Watson, last seen leaving her college dormitory 3 days prior. Captain Brooks handed her the file with his usual skeptical expression. Emily was a straight-A student from a wealthy family, no history of running away, no boyfriend troubles, no financial problems. Everything about the case screamed foul play. Yet the initial investigating team had treated it like a typical college student, taking an unplanned break from responsibility. Rachel spread the case files across her desk, noting immediately how thin they were for a 3-day investigation. The responding officer, Detective Marcus Webb, had conducted only 2 interviews, Emily's roommate and the dorm's security guard. No canvass of nearby businesses, no check of surveillance footage beyond the dormitory entrance, no contact with Emily's professors or classmates. The investigation felt rushed, almost deliberately incomplete. Emily's roommate, Jessica Chen, had provided a timeline that placed Emily leaving the dorm at approximately 8 p.m. on Thursday evening. She claimed Emily mentioned meeting someone but hadn't specified who. The security guard confirmed seeing Emily exit through the main entrance, but hadn't noticed if anyone was waiting for her outside. Webb's notes were sparse, lacking the detailed follow-up questions that should have been standard procedure. Rachel pulled Emily's academic records and discovered something Webb had overlooked. Emily was working on an investigative journalism project about local government corruption for her senior thesis. Her recent research had focused on city council members and their connections to construction contracts. The subject matter alone warranted deeper investigation, yet Webb's report made no mention of Emily's academic work. Driving to the university, Rachel reflected on her own college experience. She had studied criminal justice at the same institution 15 years earlier, drawn by professors who emphasized the importance of thorough investigation over quick closures. Those lessons had served her well, especially in cases where initial investigators seemed more interested in clearing their caseload than finding truth. The dormitory stood at the heart of campus, a modern building with keycard access and multiple security cameras. Rachel began where Webb should have started, with the security office and its comprehensive footage archives. The head of campus security, Tom Rodriguez, greeted her with evident relief. He had been waiting 3 days for someone to request the complete surveillance package. Within an hour, Rachel had identified several concerning gaps in Webb's investigation. The security cameras had captured Emily's departure, but they also showed a dark sedan following her movements across campus earlier that evening. The vehicle appeared in multiple camera angles, suggesting someone had been tracking Emily's routine. Webb had requested footage only from the dormitory entrance, missing this crucial evidence entirely. Rachel's instincts sharpened as she reviewed the material. Emily Watson hadn't simply disappeared. She had been systematically observed before vanishing. Someone had studied her patterns, waited for the right moment, and acted with precision. The question wasn't whether Emily was in danger, but why Detective Webb had conducted such a superficial investigation into what was clearly a serious crime. Jessica Chen lived 2 floors above Emily's room, in a single accommodation that reflected her family's financial comfort. She answered Rachel's knock wearing designer loungewear and an expression of mild annoyance at being disturbed during study time. Her initial responses mirrored the statements in Webb's report, but Rachel pressed for details that hadn't been explored. Emily had been excited about her thesis project, Jessica revealed when questioned more thoroughly. She had mentioned discovering something significant in public records, something that could change local politics. Emily had been cautious about sharing specifics, concerned about the implications of her research. She had mentioned meeting with a source on Thursday evening, someone who claimed to have insider information about the corruption she was investigating. Rachel documented these details carefully, frustrated by their absence from the original report. Any competent detective would have recognized the potential connection between Emily's research and her disappearance. Webb's failure to explore this angle suggested either incompetence or deliberate negligence. Given his reputation within the department, Rachel suspected the latter. The journalism department occupied the 3rd floor of the communications building, its offices lined with awards and photographs celebrating decades of investigative excellence. Professor Margaret Sullivan had supervised Emily's thesis and expressed immediate concern when Rachel introduced herself. Emily had missed 2 scheduled meetings without explanation, a highly unusual behavior for her most dedicated student. Professor Sullivan provided copies of Emily's research materials, revealing the scope of her investigation. Emily had uncovered a pattern of city council members awarding construction contracts to companies owned by their relatives or business partners. The financial irregularities totaled millions of dollars over the past 5 years, involving several prominent local families. Emily's work was thorough, documented, and potentially explosive. One name appeared repeatedly in Emily's notes, a councilman Robert Sterling, whose brother-in-law's construction company had received numerous city contracts despite consistently submitting higher bids than competitors. Emily had scheduled interviews with several city employees willing to discuss the irregularities, meetings that would have taken place the week she disappeared. Rachel photographed every document, building a comprehensive understanding of Emily's investigation. The journalism professor confirmed that Emily had been excited about a breakthrough in her research, mentioning a source who promised to provide documentary evidence of the corruption. The meeting with this source had been scheduled for Thursday evening, the night Emily disappeared. Returning to the police station, Rachel requested Webb's complete case files and discovered another troubling detail. Detective Webb was married to Margaret Sterling, Councilman Sterling's daughter. The connection should have disqualified him from investigating anything related to Emily's research, yet no one had flagged the conflict of interest. Webb had actively buried evidence that might have exposed his father-in-law's corrupt activities. Rachel brought her findings to Captain Brooks, expecting immediate action to reassign the case and investigate Webb's conduct. Instead, Brooks listened with growing discomfort and suggested that Rachel might be overreaching. Webb was a respected detective with 12 years of experience, Brooks reminded her. Making accusations against a colleague required substantial evidence, not just speculation about missed opportunities. The response disappointed but didn't surprise Rachel. Department politics often protected incompetent or corrupt officers, especially those with connections to influential families. Brooks himself had aspirations for higher office and wouldn't want to antagonize powerful city council members. Rachel realized she would need to build an ironclad case before anyone would take action against Webb. That evening, Rachel visited Emily's parents at their suburban home, a well-maintained property that spoke to family stability and success. David and Linda Watson had been waiting desperately for updates, frustrated by the lack of communication from the police department. They confirmed Emily's excitement about her thesis project and her concern about potential retaliation from those she was investigating. Emily had called her parents on Wednesday evening, the day before she disappeared, expressing worry that someone might be following her. She had noticed the same car parked near the dormitory on multiple occasions and felt uncomfortable walking alone on campus. The Watsons had urged her to contact campus security, but Emily had been reluctant to make what she feared might be a false alarm. Rachel reviewed the security footage again with this new information, focusing on the days leading up to Emily's disappearance. The dark sedan appeared in multiple locations around campus, always positioned to observe Emily's movements. The license plate was partially obscured, but Rachel could make out enough digits to trace the vehicle registration. The sedan was registered to Sterling Construction, the company owned by Councilman Sterling's brother-in-law. The connection was no longer circumstantial. Someone associated with the Sterling family had been actively surveilling Emily Watson in the days before her disappearance. Webb's failure to investigate this angle now appeared deliberately obstructive rather than merely incompetent. Rachel faced a delicate situation. Pursuing the investigation meant challenging not only Detective Webb, but also powerful political figures with influence over the police department. Her career could suffer significant damage if she proceeded without absolute certainty. Yet Emily Watson remained missing, and every passing hour reduced the chances of finding her alive. She decided to work the case quietly, building evidence while maintaining the appearance of following standard procedures. Rachel began by contacting Emily's journalism sources independently, using Emily's notes to identify city employees willing to discuss the corruption they had witnessed. Several agreed to meet confidentially, concerned about potential retaliation, but committed to exposing wrongdoing. The first source, a city planning office employee named Michael Torres, provided detailed information about the contract approval process. He explained how proposals were structured to favor Sterling Construction, with specifications written to exclude other bidders. The corruption was systematic and involved multiple city departments, generating millions in improper profits over several years. Torres also confirmed that Emily had been in contact with a high-level source within the city administration, someone with access to documents that would prove the corruption allegations. This source had agreed to meet Emily on Thursday evening, but Torres didn't know the person's identity or the meeting location. Emily had been cautious about protecting her sources, understanding the risks they faced in exposing powerful interests. Rachel expanded her investigation to include financial records and construction contracts, working through public information requests that couldn't be blocked by department interference. The documentation supported Emily's research completely, revealing a pattern of corruption that extended beyond simple nepotism into systematic fraud against taxpayers. As Rachel dug deeper, she began receiving subtle warnings to focus on other cases. Captain Brooks suggested she had spent enough time on what appeared to be a voluntary missing person case. Other detectives mentioned that Webb had connections throughout the department and wasn't someone to antagonize unnecessarily. The pressure was gentle but unmistakable. Drop the investigation or face consequences. Rachel's father had prepared her for moments like this during their Sunday morning conversations years earlier. He had explained that real police work sometimes meant standing alone against corruption, even when that corruption existed within the department itself. Justice required courage, he had told her, especially when seeking justice was politically inconvenient. On the following Sunday morning, exactly 1 week after Emily's disappearance, Rachel received an anonymous phone call. The caller, speaking in a disguised voice, provided GPS coordinates for a location 30 miles outside the city. They claimed Emily Watson could be found there, but warned that time was running out. The call ended before Rachel could ask questions, leaving her with a critical decision about how to proceed. Rachel faced the choice of following protocol and informing Captain Brooks about the anonymous tip, knowing that Webb would likely be assigned to respond, or investigating the coordinates herself. Given Webb's apparent obstruction of the case, involving him could endanger Emily if she was still alive. Rachel decided to check the location alone, understanding the professional and personal risks of her decision. The coordinates led to an abandoned warehouse complex in an industrial area known for drug activity and violent crime. Rachel approached carefully, calling for backup but not identifying the specific reason for her visit. The building showed signs of recent use despite its abandoned appearance: fresh tire tracks, disturbed debris around the entrance, and security cameras that appeared functional. Inside the warehouse, Rachel discovered evidence of recent occupancy. A small room had been converted into a makeshift holding area with restraints and basic supplies. Personal items scattered around the space included Emily's student identification card and the notebook she had been carrying when she disappeared. Blood stains on the concrete floor suggested violence had occurred, but the amount wasn't necessarily fatal. Rachel documented the scene thoroughly while waiting for backup to arrive. The evidence suggested Emily had been held captive for several days before being moved to another location. The professional setup indicated this wasn't a random crime, but a planned kidnapping related to her journalism investigation. Someone had taken Emily to prevent her from exposing their corruption. When backup units arrived, Rachel briefed them on the discovery while carefully omitting details about Webb's connection to the Sterling family. She requested crime scene investigators and began coordinating a search of the surrounding area. The warehouse provided the first concrete evidence that Emily had been the victim of a serious crime, justifying expanded investigative resources. Webb arrived at the scene within an hour, ostensibly to assist with the investigation. Rachel observed him carefully, noting his reactions to various pieces of evidence. When shown Emily's notebook, Webb quickly flipped through pages containing her research notes about city corruption. He suggested the materials might not be relevant to determining her current location, an opinion that contradicted standard investigative practice. Crime scene investigators discovered additional evidence that Webb seemed eager to downplay. Fingerprints on various surfaces belonged to individuals with criminal records, including 2 men previously arrested for assault and kidnapping. Security camera footage from nearby businesses might have captured vehicle traffic around the warehouse during the relevant time period. Webb argued these leads were probably unproductive, showing reluctance to pursue obvious investigative avenues. Rachel began to understand the full scope of the situation. Webb wasn't just protecting his father-in-law from embarrassment about corruption. He was actively obstructing a kidnapping investigation to prevent exposure of criminal activities. His behavior suggested knowledge of Emily's location and the people responsible for her disappearance. The corruption Emily had been investigating was serious enough that powerful people were willing to commit violent crimes to protect their secrets. That evening, Rachel met privately with Captain Brooks to present her evidence about Webb's obstruction and conflict of interest. She provided documentation of his family connections to the Sterling investigation and detailed his suspicious behavior at the warehouse scene. Brooks listened with obvious discomfort, recognizing the implications of Rachel's findings, but reluctant to take decisive action. Brooks explained the political complexities of investigating a detective with family connections to city leadership. Any accusations against Webb would generate scrutiny of the entire department and potentially damage relationships with city officials. He suggested Rachel continue her investigation carefully, while avoiding direct confrontation with Webb or public disclosure of her suspicions. Rachel left the meeting frustrated by Brooks' political concerns, but understanding his position. She needed stronger evidence before anyone would take action against Webb, and Emily Watson remained in danger while bureaucratic considerations delayed justice. Rachel decided to pursue the investigation independently, accepting the career risks of challenging departmental corruption. The following morning brought a breakthrough when one of Emily's journalism sources contacted Rachel directly. The source, a city finance employee named Angela Rodriguez, had been scheduled to meet Emily on Thursday evening, but had received a last-minute cancellation. Angela had documentary evidence of fraudulent contract approvals that Emily had planned to include in her thesis, materials that would definitively prove the corruption allegations. Angela agreed to meet Rachel at a neutral location, expressing concern about potential surveillance by those implicated in the corruption. She provided photocopies of financial records showing systematic manipulation of the bidding process for city construction projects. The documents revealed that Sterling Construction had received preferential treatment worth millions of dollars over 5 years, with approval processes bypassing normal oversight procedures. More importantly, Angela revealed that Emily had been in contact with someone within the police department who was providing information about the investigation into city corruption. This source had warned Emily that her research was attracting dangerous attention and advised her to be careful about public disclosure of her findings. Angela didn't know the identity of Emily's police contact, but suspected it was someone with access to ongoing investigations. Rachel realized that Emily's disappearance might have been orchestrated by someone aware of police investigative procedures and surveillance capabilities. The professional nature of the kidnapping and the effectiveness of the cover-up suggested involvement by individuals with law enforcement experience or connections. Webb's behavior was consistent with someone protecting co-conspirators rather than simply covering up family embarrassment. Investigation of the fingerprints found at the warehouse revealed connections to a security company that had worked extensively with Sterling Construction. Two employees of Blackstone Security Services matched prints found at the scene, both with criminal records for violent offenses. The company was owned by another relative of Councilman Sterling, expanding the network of family businesses benefiting from corrupt city contracts. Rachel requested surveillance records for Blackstone Security, discovering that the company had been monitoring Emily's activities for several weeks before her disappearance. GPS tracking data from company vehicles showed regular surveillance of the university campus and Emily's residential area. The systematic observation indicated that Emily's kidnapping had been planned carefully by professionals with access to sophisticated equipment and techniques. When Rachel attempted to interview Blackstone security employees, she discovered that Webb had already contacted the company and advised them not to cooperate with police inquiries. Webb had claimed the investigation was focusing on unrelated matters and that employee interviews were unnecessary. His interference had effectively blocked standard investigative procedures and protected potential suspects from questioning. Rachel documented Webb's obstruction carefully, building a case that extended beyond simple conflict of interest into active participation in criminal conspiracy. His actions had consistently protected those responsible for Emily's disappearance, while misdirecting investigative resources away from productive leads. The pattern suggested coordination with the kidnappers rather than mere negligence or bias. Captain Brooks remained reluctant to take action against Webb without overwhelming evidence of criminal activity. He emphasized the need for absolute certainty before making accusations that could destroy careers and generate political controversy. Brooks suggested that Rachel focus on finding Emily rather than pursuing allegations against fellow officers, advice that ignored the connection between Webb's obstruction and Emily's continued captivity. Rachel realized she needed to work outside official channels to make progress on the case. She began coordinating privately with federal authorities who had jurisdiction over corruption cases involving city officials. The FBI had been monitoring Sterling family activities for several months as part of a broader investigation into municipal corruption, and Emily's research aligned with their ongoing intelligence gathering. Federal agents confirmed that Emily Watson had contacted the FBI 2 weeks before her disappearance, offering to share her research in exchange for protection from potential retaliation. The FBI had scheduled a meeting with Emily for the week following her disappearance, planning to use her documentation as evidence in their corruption investigation. Her kidnapping had eliminated a key witness and delayed federal prosecution of the Sterling conspiracy. The FBI agreed to coordinate with Rachel's investigation while maintaining operational secrecy to protect their broader case. They provided additional evidence of Sterling family criminal activities, including money laundering and witness intimidation. The federal investigation revealed that Emily's disappearance was part of a pattern of retaliation against those who threatened the corruption network. Working with federal resources, Rachel identified the likely location where Emily was being held. Financial records showed that Sterling Construction owned several properties outside the city that could serve as secure holding facilities. Phone surveillance had captured communications between Blackstone security employees discussing transport to a remote facility near the state border. Rachel coordinated with FBI agents to plan a rescue operation that would minimize risks to Emily while preserving evidence of the criminal conspiracy. The operation needed to proceed without local police department involvement to prevent Webb from warning the kidnappers. Rachel's participation required her to operate outside departmental authority, a career-ending decision if the rescue attempt failed. On Sunday morning, exactly 2 weeks after Emily's disappearance, Rachel joined FBI agents in approaching the Sterling construction facility where Emily was believed to be held. The property sat on 50 acres of wooded land with limited access roads, making surveillance and escape difficult for both kidnappers and rescuers. Intelligence suggested Emily was alive, but under guard by armed Blackstone security personnel. The rescue operation succeeded in locating Emily Watson alive, but injured in a converted storage building on the property. She had been held captive for 2 weeks, subjected to psychological pressure to abandon her research and agree to remain silent about Sterling family corruption. Her captors had planned to release her after obtaining commitments to destroy her documentation and cease investigating city contracts. Emily's rescue provided direct evidence of the criminal conspiracy involving Councilman Sterling, Blackstone Security, and Detective Webb. She had witnessed conversations between her kidnappers that implicated Webb in planning the operation and coordinating police responses to misdirect the investigation. Webb had provided inside information about search procedures and evidence collection that helped the kidnappers avoid detection. The FBI arrested multiple suspects simultaneously, including Councilman Sterling, Blackstone security employees, and Detective Webb. The coordination prevented destruction of evidence and eliminated opportunities for suspects to flee or retaliate against witnesses. Emily's documentation, combined with federal investigation materials, provided comprehensive evidence of systematic corruption spanning several years. Webb's arrest sent shockwaves through the police department and city government. His confession revealed the extent of corruption within both institutions, implicating additional officers and city officials in various criminal activities. The investigation that began with Emily's disappearance expanded into the largest municipal corruption case in the city's history. Captain Brooks faced serious questions about his failure to investigate Webb's conduct, despite obvious warning signs. His reluctance to pursue corruption allegations had enabled continued criminal activity and endangered Emily's life. Brooks announced his resignation rather than face formal disciplinary proceedings, acknowledging his failure to maintain departmental integrity. Rachel testified before federal grand juries about her investigation and Webb's obstruction of justice. Her decision to work outside departmental authority while protecting Emily's life was recognized as heroic rather than insubordinate. The FBI commended her dedication to justice despite institutional pressure to abandon the case. Emily Watson recovered from her physical injuries and completed her journalism thesis with additional materials provided during her captivity. Her research contributed to federal prosecutions that resulted in multiple convictions and prison sentences for those involved in the corruption conspiracy. She graduated with honors and accepted a position with an investigative journalism organization specializing in government accountability. Detective Rachel Martinez received departmental commendations for her investigation and was promoted to lead the newly created Public Integrity Unit. Her reputation for thorough investigation and resistance to political pressure attracted the attention of federal law enforcement agencies, leading to opportunities for specialized training and career advancement. The Sterling corruption case resulted in comprehensive reforms of city contracting procedures and police department oversight. New policies required disclosure of conflicts of interest and established independent review of investigations involving public officials. The changes were designed to prevent future corruption and ensure accountability for those who violated public trust. Rachel's call sign, Sunday, took on additional meaning after the case. Her Sunday morning rescue of Emily Watson became legendary within law enforcement circles, inspiring other officers to prioritize justice over political convenience. She continued working Sunday shifts, finding that quiet mornings remained her most productive time for solving difficult cases. Years later, Rachel reflected on the lessons learned from Emily's case. The investigation had demonstrated the importance of following evidence regardless of political implications or departmental pressure. Justice required courage and persistence, especially when corruption attempted to subvert the very institutions designed to protect citizens. Emily Watson became a successful investigative journalist, specializing in exposing government corruption and protecting whistleblowers from retaliation. She maintained contact with Rachel, occasionally collaborating on cases where journalism and law enforcement interests aligned. Their partnership represented a commitment to accountability that transcended professional boundaries. The warehouse where Emily was initially held became a symbol of survival and justice for the community. The building was converted into a training facility for law enforcement officers, with programs emphasizing ethical investigation and resistance to corruption. Rachel occasionally taught classes there, sharing lessons learned from her most challenging case. Detective Webb received a 15-year prison sentence for his role in the conspiracy, serving as a warning to other officers who might consider compromising their integrity for personal gain. His conviction demonstrated that law enforcement corruption would face serious consequences, regardless of political connections or departmental relationships. Rachel Martinez earned her reputation as an officer who never missed when pursuing justice. Her methodical investigation style and refusal to accept superficial answers made her the department's most requested detective for complex cases. She understood that real police work required dedication to truth, even when that truth challenged powerful interests or popular assumptions.